Hey everybody, this is Renae from The Space Between, and you are listening to The Space Between podcast, the show that lets you listen to how the fans feel about the music, the art behind over 30 years of the Dave Matthews Band. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Space Between podcast, the podcast where we talk about the fans of the Dave Matthews Band. Each week we bring to you a new fan of the Dave Matthews Band to talk about their journey, if you will, with the Dave Matthews Band. And often I get to meet a lot of fans that have, well, everyone has a cool story, but sometimes stories just stick out because we're aware of their story in some way. So today I welcome Rob on the show. And of course, we've got Andy. Andy is the editor of this show. And so I've asked him to come on today. So thank you, Andy. But our guest is Rob today. And I have asked him to come on to talk about something that we all know and love, the DMB Almanac. So Rob, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, just tell us, we know who you are. Tell us where you are in the world and tell us kind of how in the world did you find the Dave Matthews Band and how long have you been a fan?
Yeah, so I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I think that first exposure was the MTV Buzzbins CD with What Would You Say on it that a friend of mine had, and I didn't really get it. I was like listening to all classic rock at that point in time. It was just really super different, and maybe a couple of years later, just started finding it on the radio. I think I remember specifically on my birthday when John Denver died in a plane accident. And I drove around listening to John Denver just that afternoon and evening with John Denver. And finally, when it was time to wrap up and go home, Satellite was on the radio right when I turned my CD off, and I stopped and I bought Under the Table and Dreaming on the way home. So it's kind of this nice transition of music in my life. And then Red Rocks came out right after that, and bought Red Rocks. So, and even my classic rock, I was always kind of a live music collector. Like I had collected Zeppelin bootlegs like through high school and before that. So I kind of vibed with the live at Red Rocks more than the studio, really, even.
For sure.
And was still kind of, a bit of a fan at that point in time. Interested at least, which is when Crowded Streets came out, right? And was in line in the morning to buy Crowded Streets before class. And really it took off from there. Still really stayed with the live over the studio, even though I hadn't been to a show yet and hadn't really even been to a whole lot of concerts yet. And I was listening to some live version of Say Goodbye and the lyrics were entirely different. And then I listened to a different live version of Say Goodbye and the lyrics were entirely different. And I basically went out of my way to collect as many as I could, with all these different lyrics. And then really it meant that I was more into the live stuff than the studio stuff from the very beginning. And then also having collected shows of other bands, it was really easy to get into DMB, especially when you see that they're rotating every night, even with a small catalog at the time, but it was still different from what I was used to, and it kind of hit my OCD.
Okay, so Rob, just because we know so much about what you do going into this, tell me, how does a fan go from loving the music and chasing all of the different lyrics of the same song to creating a website, or even talking about having a discussion about, let's keep track of statistics where everyone has that at their fingertips? How do you go from fan to what you are now, which is kind of a super fan, if you will?
Yeah, it's, back then we had a couple of different set list sites, but none of them were comprehensive. So we had like a set list warehouse that would have maybe a couple of years and it was really spotty. And then Nancy's.org was kind of doing their thing at that point in time, like in 98, which was really good with the recent stuff. It was also coming directly from the band. Sometimes it was coming from the fans, and just not really all that much communication, and really, without a whole lot of internet at that point. We're not streaming shows, you're not downloading shows the next day. And it just wasn't all that accurate. And especially to have to go to Setlist Warehouse, and there was another one at the time too, or have to go to Nancy's. And so what you would do is you would just go to people's tape pages and look for shows that they had that you didn't have. And then you would go look at the set list, and we had to go to like one of three different set lists at the time. So I just started tracking it myself in Excel, like all the set lists that I could come up with from all of the different places.
Wow.
And then I would say it was after the 2000 tour, I just wanted to teach myself front page, teach myself how to do a website. And so every single show that's happening, I'm going in and I'm creating a table and I'm creating a manual page. And I would say it was about, it was like 2.5 to 3 hours worth of manual work, because then you had to go to each song page and add the line. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And one of my friends, Nate Tilton, had a website, justdmb.com, that was doing cover art and all kinds of different graphics and stuff, like, a little spinning fire dancer, which seemed so easy, was like, where can I go to find this? Well, go to justdmb.com. And he hosted that for me for a bit while I was just doing it all manually. So that was maybe 2000 and 2001. I was doing it by hand. I would say that there were probably maybe 5 people who knew about it, but really it was just for me. It was just a place where I could go to find everything, where I could do my own stats because they weren't being done elsewhere, where I could go to look up tapes that I wanted to get. And really, that's just what it started. It started for me, like a place that I could click around. And a lot of the things that I wanted to put into the site came from some of the software that I was tracking from other bands. And I think it all changed at Gorge 2001 when I got together with one of my friends, Matias Nino, after I think it was night 2 of the Gorge, and we were sitting around a campfire, and he's just like, you do that all by hand? Like, I could code that for you. Just send me over the spreadsheets. And we got back from the Gorge, and I just started sending in spreadsheets, and I didn't even really know what was happening. And maybe a week before the 2002 spring tour started, so this would have been for the 402 DC show, he said, here's the link, and basically had taken all the data that I had given him, and it doesn't look that different to what we have today. We've added a lot, like with the different things on the side and up at the top, but I mean, it's black, dark blue, and orange. Like, the set list pages look like the set list pages look today. And really, I just had no idea what he was doing and just came back to it. And so really, he kind of built something that we could automate that would do all the stats for us. And all we had to do was enter in the songs. So it started really with Matias and I, kind of the idea and the data from me. And then he did all of the work behind the scenes to put it together at that point.
I see. I love that. And that just blows my mind that wasn't going to be my question. Just like, what drove you to create something like this? Because nowadays it's a staple in quite literally almost every Dave Matthews Band fan. I mean, if you have any questions, like, oh yeah, like when you go to Facebook and someone asks a question about any particular show or have they done this, the first comment, I guarantee you, every single time is DMB Almanac.
That's amazing.
Like it's boom, it's right there. And to think that you just did that because, like, man, I've got just this information. I just want to do this for me. But there was this demand that was really out there, but no one could really quantify that and put it together in something that is used every single day.
Hey, I use it more than anybody. Like, in all honesty, if there were a way to track which user uses it, I use it as a fan, whether I'm working through my own collection or I'm just bored looking at stuff or I get caught in a rabbit hole. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's had the legs that it's had or the durability is just because I feel like for the first, it's 21 years at this point. I feel like for the first 15 years or so, we were just doing stuff that we wanted as a fan base for ourselves, whether it was the 8 of us or whether it was for, this other group of friends that we've been making along the way. That's one of the reasons why I think it's worked is we've just kind of, again, we put what we want to see and have been really fortunate that other people want to see it too.
And one of my questions was, and I had always wondered this, now more so, because nowadays with the technology we have, obviously, I when I go to the shows, I'm recording everything. But even prior to that, now there's people streaming or live streaming at the shows, so you can kind of see exactly what's happening as it's happening with a minor delay.
Yeah.
But like you said, like when you were working on this, the early 2000s, they weren't, the iPhones weren't as prevalent. There were maybe Blackberries, but how were you getting the set list information? Was it as in real time as it was happening like it is today? Or was it like, if you have sources or contacts within, obviously I'm not asking you to divulge those, but
No.
how do you get that information? How do you get that information as it's happening back in the day when the live service now is not what it used to be?
Well, and I think they started doing the live set list in 2000, and I think that's what made a lot more of this possible. But even then, in the early days, especially with the West Coast shows, we were doing set lists the next morning. I mean, we were doing at 8:00 when we would wake up, but they started doing the live set list for the Summer Tour 2000. And I think one of the interesting things, because we didn't really advertise the site at all. Like, we don't have ads on the site still from day one. We haven't put ads on the site since we went live April 3rd, 2002. We're not the type to go to the message boards and blast it all over the place either. Again, it was something that we were kind of creating for ourselves, not really for anybody else. We actually needed to keep traffic down in the beginning because, we were paying for it, right? 2002. I mean, we're in our 20s. I'm still like 10 years away from not delivering pizzas anymore at that point in time, and just the hosting, especially back then, everything gets cheaper as time goes on. And the hosting was expensive back then, where we pretty much had a certain server limit that we had to keep to, or we were paying it out of our own pockets. We weren't getting any sort of donations back then or anything. And so I would say probably from 2000 to 2002, we were a best kept secret in the fan base. And the big difference, I think, for us started with the 2003 Dave and Tim tour, which for whatever reason, you'd have to ask them. They didn't do a live set list for the first time, right? Dave and Tim went out on the road. I'm sure it was a reduced crew. There's no one back there who thinks that people care enough. They'll put it up after or whatever. So that was the first time when we were the first source of information, I think. And it was, well, who's got the set list? Well, DMB Almanac has it. And I'm like, who? And that was the first time that I think people really started to find the site. And we were when we realized we weren't getting set lists right away, we had calls. We weren't even really texting in 2013. We had calls after the show, and we would try and get that stuff up immediately. But we also paid the price because
from people who went to the shows. They were just writing down the set list for you and
calling us out
and then calling you up. And that is fantastic.
And it's kind of funny because we were right. We got a big bill for the service like 4 or so weeks later, which we were just like, okay, we gotta, if people are going to start using it, then, we need to start doing some things that can support it a little better, or like to do things a little bit cheaper. And I think really that's kind of when the site took off. It was there for a couple years with maybe only 100 people.
Wow. So how did you grow your staff, if you will? I mean, how do you go from a 2-man operation to continually growing to the 8 that you have now? How do you find these buds? Are they just good DMB friends, or did they specialize in something that you needed in order to make this work?
Yeah, I think with Matthias and I starting, especially, and him being more of the technical front, I was doing most of the entry at that point in time. He would do something as well too, and I just needed help. And there was one of my friends, I think the first one to join was Andy Bowman, and he was just one of those guys who was just really into stats and would come up with a lot of the unique stats, like a lot of the rarity stats that we have on there were tweaks that were done by Andy, and just still comes up with stats right now that I don't really understand. And I'm just like, okay, like share them with whoever, but whatever. He was the first one to join. And then I think our second one, I may be getting the order wrong a little bit here, but that's okay. We've got Dan Cheatham after that. And Dan was one of those people who is just so like he's the right person to have on our staff. Like, he's, basically the librarian of the group. He's the one who, like, a lot of the recent discography, like, he's just has the tenacity to take one of these big jobs and fill out every single detail of 1,000 different releases down to the track. And he was submitting so many emails that I was just like, we just need to give this guy a login, and was just a part of the site after that because I couldn't keep up with him anymore. We also had Henry Hart join, who is kind of the legend, right? The legend taper, Henry Hart, who has, he's done just about everything. Started taping in 2000, and two of the big things that he's done for the website, he did all of the venue work that we've done in the website. So we weren't splitting out venues, doing stats by venues. And I think one of the really cool things that we did, we came along in 2000. It was hard for us to make an impact on the early days, like the 91 through the 93 or whatever, just because that takes a lot of unearthing, and it takes having been there. And we weren't really there at that point in time. And one of the things that Henry did was Henry worked with the University of Vermont that's the people who started the first mailing list for DMB. It was called the Minarets list. It started back in 93, like right before Remember Two Things came out. And there were like 2 digests of this that were extant, and they had setlist info. And it was just like, imagine if we could get that whole thing. And Henry worked with the University of Vermont and irritated them long enough that one of their professors was like, you know what? I think it would be a good project for our students to learn data recovery. And he put a couple of students in charge, and they recovered every email of the first mailing list from 93 to 95. And we got so much information that was just lost. And I think what was great about it is it felt like I kind of felt like everything that we did from 95 on was pretty hard to get better than that. Like, of course we can find things, but that really made me feel like we had kind of made an impact on the entire timeline at that point. And then because Henry had pulled that off, Matthias asked him for what feature he wanted coded, and Henry said venues. Yeah. So we have Henry to thank for the venues, and he did all of the venues as well too.
It's amazing.
I kind of love that feature too, because I always like going back and after I go to a show and I'm just like, man, well, for me, it's Texas, because with my fandom, just a brief history. Once I saw them in Austin in 99, I've been to every single show in Texas since then. So when I see one, just like, man, I know I heard that forever. When was the last time I even heard that here? And I go back and I can pull up DMB Almanac, the venue, and just go, they never even freaking played that here yet. Holy crap. And it just adds more value to that. It's just a piece of data. It just adds to the experience.
Yeah, and then I just want to I'll touch on the couple other admins that we have. We've got a couple, like Chris Drews has done a lot of the work in the My Almanac. The doctor is very good with venues and seat locations and all that. So the My Almanac work with the different ticketing stubs and the locations and that stuff. Chris does a lot of that for us. Jay Lankford is another one of our admins who's done a lot with the My Almanac, the separation of the bands, so you can look up what Dave and Tim have played versus what DMB have played, is Jay as well. And then our last admin is Bob Hagg, who has done a lot of our kind of PR work. He knows people, and we need people who know people. That's so right. He's been one of our people that's gotten us connected with a lot of folks as well too. And it's not just admins. I mean, we've all gone back for a really, really long time, and we've got enough friends that are basically part of the team but not official. We've got friends on the West Coast that'll stay up entering the sets for us when we're all in bed on the East Coast. So there are a lot of people who make it work.
Amazing. That's amazing.
It is.
So what does the future look like?
Gosh.
Are there things that you guys are wanting to implement? Are there any changes, as technology has made its way? Do you find yourself talking about, what if we did this? What is the next thing? Or are you guys happy with just right where it is? And there's no wrong answer, but that was definitely something that someone wanted me to ask you, is what does the future look like for the Almanac?
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Rich from the Eddie Casino Band out in Las Vegas. We're really excited to get this journey going, celebrating our music, our original music, on all platforms. We just released our first single over Labor Day weekend called Eddie Casino. If you're looking for new music, look out for our next single coming out to Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Apple Music. These guys in the band are really excited to get started playing music for you all. If you like Tom Petty, Zach Brown, Jason Mraz, Dave Matthews Band, Rob Thomas, Jimmy Buffett, Pink Floyd, Stapleton, Bare Naked Ladies, Goose, Billy Strings, Sting and the Police, a ton of influences that we bring to the table. Hope you enjoy our music and look forward to seeing you soon live on stage.
Yeah, I think one of the things is we have a new feature that we just released. It's called Lists, which is not a very good. I mean, I guess it is a good description of it, but it's very generic. And one of the things about the Almanac from the very beginning is it's just really structured, and it's great because we don't have to do a whole lot of work for each show. Really, we just need to enter the set list and we can upload, whatever needs to go with it. But I felt like we were kind of constricted in the fun things that we can do. Some of the fun stats that we come up with on our own, or that we publish to Twitter, or some of those things, we just didn't have any place to put any of that. So all that we could really do was come up with a front page write-up, which then would require you to basically create tables in HTML. And I mean, we're not creating a bunch of tables in HTML. It's just not happening. So we feel like outside of just updating show data, that we wanted to do a bit more to present some kind of wacky stuff and the stuff that makes us laugh or whatever. So we came up with the idea of the lists, and basically what it is it's a big spreadsheet. Is the way that it looks to me on my end, is that I can add whatever columns or whatever type I want. I can add rows, whatever rows I want. It's still a table. You're still limited by the tables, but it's not just shows anymore. And I think one thing that is the best thing about our site, and maybe some people will say it's the worst thing about our site, is that it's entirely objective, right? We have no subjectivity whatsoever. And that's good in a lot of ways. Number one, like, there are no fights on our site, right? There's nobody crabbing. Like, it's a 100% positive place, right? It's just a good vibes place. And I think that that's really important. And you may argue that, hey, even rating shows like 1 to 10, like, maybe that's not that big of a deal. It doesn't really have the interaction. But I think we wanted it to pretty much be none of that. We wanted it to be a book of facts, which is, the Almanac term, right?
Right.
But over the years, what I think it has done is it has stopped shows from standing out. And, we're all big enough fans. We've all been to enough shows. Obviously, we love enough of the music that, we're going to love most of the shows anyway. But nothing on our site really stands out. Even the rarity kind of stands out. And maybe that shouldn't really be judgment. But we just wanted a way to call attention to certain things in an objective way. So, like, for instance, what we've done with some of these lists that we have is we can come up with all kinds of different categories. We can do a timeline where we can look at a tour. Right now, I would say my two favorite lists that we have up, one of them is a timeline of the 1998 fall tour, right? It starts with when shows were announced, rumors of Tim Reynolds joining, and it goes through every single show saying what stands out about it, whether it's the longest version of Lion or Graves by 4.5 minutes that's ever been played, or whether there's no audience tape of a particular show. And it's just a way that we could go in and still do things objectively, but that they stand out, right? You can go in and you can look at this and you can see Bella Fleck guested on this, and this, and that's not anything that we've been able to do on the site. And the other one that I really like on the timelines is we have like 41 performances of number 41. Of course, there's a little bit of subjectivity in there, right? But
of course.
But we also try to make it objective and say we're putting it on this list for this reason, not just because we like it, or it jams or whatever. Some of the other lists that we have on here are like a complete list of live tracks, recordings, and who did the mix of every single one. Who is the engineer? What was the release date of all of those? We've got the top 20 longest say goodbye solos from the beginning until the band comes in. That's stuff that there's just no place for anything like that on the site. And it's really just maybe one of us just wonders what it is and we want to find out for ourselves. And hey, you might like it too. So I think the lists area is a huge area for us while the band is not touring to be able to add content. There are even things on the lists that we can say new shows added to the Almanac, so that if, hey, once a month while the band's not touring, you were like, I wonder what they've found. And we can go back to this new shows on the Almanac list and see, the last show that we've added is like a weird record exchange that I found in the Daily Tar Heel in 1994. So I think that's one of the ways that we're really going to grow, is that before we were limited by what the band did, and now we're not. We're limited kind of by our creativity to put together information, and maybe we're the only ones who think it's interesting. I don't know.
No. We are all just as addicted as you, but your team is just able to, for the most part, as much as you can, quantify it and put a number to it, for lack of a better term. What I wanted to ask, though, is I think a lot of people would agree the main feature that everyone loves about the site, and what adds more, I guess, value to when they go to a show, is the liberations list.
Yeah.
What is the origin of that? How did that come about? How did that idea formulate in? How did you start putting the limitations on particular songs? Because you have the list on the bottom. These are all the ones that qualify and that could come up, and here's the list. How did all that happen? Because that is for a lot of fans, liberations are a big deal on what a show means to them if they experience one.
Yeah, so the liberation list started I think that idea was mine, and I wanted something front and center that if anybody went to our website from the band or anybody involved with the band, that they could look at a list of 40 songs that haven't been played in forever. Honestly, that's what it was. It's the only reason for it. And settled on 1,000 days. I don't know why we settled on 1,000 days. In all honesty, the show model works a little better once you've had the breaks that we've had, like in 2017 for Dave and Tim, and the Caravan didn't have a lot of shows, and then COVID or whatever. I think the show model works a little better. But honestly, the liberation list came together, I think, the first time that I saw maybe Stefan post a screenshot from the Almanac. It was, okay, they know about us. So what can we do about this? So it was literally only put together for that reason. And I don't know if anybody's ever looked at it or if they've ever played a song from it for that. Now, what's cool is I mentioned Jay. I probably left out the best thing that Jay has done for our site, which was he automated the liberation list. So we used to just have it on the front page. Now every tour has its own list, which you can see what was done and what needed to be done as of that time. So he has automated that for us so that we don't need to go in every time and update the HTML code. So
wow.
Yeah, that was just awesome. Hoping to make an impact, really.
That's amazing. I love that. So if someone's listening to this for the very first time and they weren't aware of DMB Almanac, or maybe they were, but they kind of want to know, is this going to cost me money to get this information? And if it doesn't, which we know that it doesn't cost to go on your site and look at all these statistics, how in the world are you funding all of this? Is this something that you 8 guys are just passionate about and therefore, just using some of your money to put together just for your own benefit? Or what does that look like financially for you guys? Because I know a lot of people are wondering how this all works.
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was, we did pay for it, and we still run on donations. So the fact that we have no ads, everything comes from donations. And honestly, the fan base is amazing. We haven't had to pay a bill in a really long time. And it even started with one of our fans who owned like a hosting company. And when we do have an area where you can put in what shows that you've been to. Right now, just to make sure that our server is able to maintain things, we do still have like donate anything you want, donate a penny. Like literally, we don't care. We get it and we think that it's funny and we're totally fine with it. You know, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And we'll send an invite to our My Almanac, but that has really, you know, helped us stay stable. And like I said, we had a fan who had a hosting service and actually went in to create his own My Almanac account and found that his hosting service actually hosted our site for a while. And so he hosted us for a while, and it's just this generosity that we've gotten from the fans that it's been amazing. And then once he sold his company, we had to kind of move it. It's actually hosted by one of our admins in his house right now, which, you know, is pretty awesome. And with donations, I'm sure people noticed that when a big song was played over the summer or a big guest like Bella Fleck showed up, that, you know, the Almanac would be down for a minute or two with everybody hitting refresh. Well, you know, with donations that we got over the summer, we were able to purchase a new server and noticed no problems over the fall at all. Like we had no breakdowns over the fall. And I think when you ask what new things could be happening, you know, that can help as well too. You know, the donations that we get to help us get a new server means that some of the things that we haven't been able to implement yet with My Almanac are things that we can look at doing because they're not going to tax the site like they were before, just, you know, again, due to the generosity of the groups. And, you know, we have people who send us donations every year, and it's just amazing. And it's really humbling too, because
that's awesome.
Because again, all of it was just to give ourselves a place to look something up. And the fact that people love it that much, and, you know, it is really humbling. I think
that's amazing.
That's one of the things that over the past couple of years that I've realized the most is just like, you know, again, other people are enjoying it as well.
Yeah, that makes it wonderful. So let's talk about other people for just a few minutes. I, of course, put a poll out, and so I asked what people would ask if they were on this right now with you. So if you don't mind, we're going to do a couple of guest questions. So this is from Dal Patrick. He said, how many hours a week would you say that y'all spend on researching the stats for the website?
Wow. Well, during the tour, I mean, there's always somebody online, but, you know, our admins have our own Discord group. I would say between all of us, I mean, during the tour, it's definitely more than 40 hours, way more than 40 hours during the tour, because, you know, not only are you up doing the shows, but when we get recordings, we're going in and we're looking at notes, we're doing times for everything, we're doing updates from the list. Plus, when the tour is going, like it's hard to not be motivated, right? Like every single day gives you something else to look up, whether it's, you know, new venue information that we're posting or the new lists or something. So yeah, I would say between us, it's easily a full-time job when the band is touring. And then there's just I don't have anything else to do, so I'm just going to go on newspapers.com and look for old shows, right? Another thing that we've been doing a lot recently is we're kind of obsessed with filling out the early history of the band as much as we can. And we've been in contact with a lot of old tapers to try and get the tapes that they have, because there's so much that's mislabeled. There's so much that, you know, people with big collections are like, well, you know, everything that I've got is out there. It's not. Like we find so much small audio, which is missing a song here and there, and new music. Like it doesn't get any better than new music. You find like somebody has tape, and you not only find like a new set list, but a brand new show that no one had anything to do with. And that's been a big focus recently as well too.
That's amazing.
I bet that's a great feeling when you discover a new show, which in reality is a really, really old show, but no one knew it happened. Like, what is that like? When you're just like, oh man, they played this date in '96. Who was there?
It's basically 8 people online in a chat getting excited about really, really small dumb shit, right? Like, you know, like a small comment that Dave makes about a fraternity or something. We've got more information, and then it's like, what else can we pull out of this? You know, but there's a lot of that stuff, and we've found a lot of new sources of audio that maybe only had like cassette recordings before that we're finding digital recordings for. So really there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes. And it's one of the reasons why we wanted to get these lists up and going, because we feel like we do so much work that doesn't get seen at all. Where at least now, if we can add a running list of shows that we've added or new set lists or something like that, that it'll call attention to a lot of the work that's being done on the back end. We created we have 2 Twitter accounts, right, which probably drives a lot of people crazy, but one of them is kind of for bigger stuff. And then one of them is because, hey, we found a tape that's got like an extra little bit of house music, and you really need to know what the house music of this 93 show was. So we'll throw that on the Almanac updates count
It's so cool.
as well, too.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more questions. So this is from Chris Clifford. He said, do you ever think, holy shit, what have I got myself into? And will this band ever stop? No. You know what? Sometimes, like, I remember it was probably, I think around 2013 when I started to see people at concerts on the site on their phone, and that was a holy shit moment. That was kind of like all right, like,
that's me.
Like we've created something that's going to last. And I guess as time has gone on here, and I follow a lot of bands, right? Like I like Fish as much as I like Dave Matthews Band. My like I mentioned earlier, my Zeppelin collection is, live collection is big. And I think that there was a time when I was going back researching like an old Led Zeppelin show or something on like an Underground Uprising website or something like that. And I was just like, like 40 years from now, like it's my site that people are going to be looking that up. And that was definitely kind of a holy shit when you realize that, for sure.
Absolutely.
I do that.
It's never been too big.
I have the right there. I'm guilty of that. I have my phone there and I've got Almanac up because I remember there'll be instances where like, did he mess that up? Or did I mess that up? Like singing in my head, I was like, I would just refresh Almanac in like 20 minutes and they'll be in the notes, whatever. It's like, yeah, I knew I wasn't going crazy. So I'm one of those two. It has Almanac on just refresh in my pocket during the show.
Well, yeah, and like in the late 90s, like I have ticket stubs with the set list written on the back in a thin Sharpie because you had to know how far into the show you were, and that's not even necessarily an Almanac thing. Like it's a data at your fingertips thing, but it's still,
Yep.
Yeah, I get it.
So no, I've never really thought maybe it's what you've gotten into when you start to do one of these big list projects and you're like, okay, I need to listen to every Say Goodbye and track how long the intros are. But it's also, you wear that like a badge.
Right, absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely. So this is another question from Matthew Curtis. He says, I'm going to read what he says first and then I'm going to add to it. He said, can we get an Android app? And so let's talk about apps. Have you guys ever thought from going from strictly website to an app?
What's up, everybody? This is David with the Dave Matthews Tribute Band. We're a nationally touring tribute to DMB, playing shows all over the country and beyond. Our goal is to bring you back to the classic sound that you fell in love with in the 90s and the 2000s, featuring a violin, saxophone, and maybe some keyboards sprinkled in as well. You can find out information about all of our tours and shows by visiting thedmtb.com. You can also check us out on Facebook and Instagram and other socials by searching the Dave Matthews Tribute Band or the DMTB. Hope to see you on the road and enjoy the Space Between podcast.
Yeah, it's the DMB Almanac Civil War, actually. I think that there are people who would appreciate an app. But also when I see the people at the show, the people who aren't us, who I know how to use it, like they're like swipe, double tap, tap the window, zoom in, zoom out. Like,
yep. Done.
But and part of it is like the amount of effort that it takes to build an app. I mean, we have talked about doing an app before, and I think we would have to, like, the data that we would present, it would have to make sense. So, all of the data that we have, it doesn't fit nicely into an app. So then so what exactly would be the purpose of the app? And I think it would be to help people at shows, right? Like, to not necessarily have to zoom and swipe and all that. And, the idea is there. Of course, the talk is there. I just don't think that the motivation has been there. And part of that has been because we do have limited resources when it comes to development. I mentioned that we have a couple of coders, but every coder that I mentioned has multiple children with sports. And, it's just not, we're not in our 20s anymore. So I think the app development is taking a back burner. Now, we could see it in the future, I think, especially as some of the things that we've talked about, like lists, we want to enhance our personal stats a little bit as well, too. I think that we will probably get to it, but there also has to be a reason. And if it's just for visibility, well, I don't know. I don't know when, but it could. It could.
So, of course, Rob, you are a big fan of the Dave Matthews Band. So what does your future look like? Are there any hopes for future? Like, do you want to go to Europe? Do you want to go to Cancun? Like, what is your normal thing? Like, are you a summertime only? What really is Dave Matthews Band to you? Like, what is your favorite part of that?
Yeah, I was really hardcore in the beginning. Like, so when I first started going to shows in the 90s, I went to way more shows than I could afford. And then, I was a little bit more reasonable over the years, but I would say as I've gotten a little older and the band has gotten a little older and, life is a little bit easier, I just feel like I don't want to miss big shows, so I'm not going to. I had a big year this year. I don't know exactly what my motto is going to be for next year, but, I plan on doing between, 15 and 20 next year. I don't know how much longer they have. I figure that Dave will play forever, but I don't know how much longer what we're seeing, like we see it, is going to continue. So
exactly.
Yeah, I see myself. Let's see, I'm at 159 for concerts. I definitely want to hit 200 in the next couple of years.
We want you to.
So I don't know. Europe may or may not happen for me. I have soccer planned for Europe in the winter, so I don't know if 2 trips will happen, but I would see it being a big summer. I think especially during COVID, it was, not going to take the shows for granted. And I've been able to do that, which is nice. Try to get to as many tour openers as possible to keep that surprise going, because, where you want to be to get the surprises is there. And I'm definitely... I'm the type of fan, and not all fans are like this, and not all my friends are like this. I would rather be surprised by 10 songs at a show than hear my 10 favorite songs at a show. I think I've been to enough shows. I go to enough shows that I hear the songs that I love. They play the songs that I love a lot. So I don't mind hearing a song that I never hear that's not necessarily at the top of my list. That's just kind of the way that I am. I like to keep the rotation going for me.
So statistics aside, if you can do that, I don't know if you have that ability, but statistics aside, what was a highlight for you in 2023?
Wow. 2023 was great for me. I actually did a lot myself in 2023. And it was a year where I added on a lot. I felt personally a lot more freedom this year. I had a rough 22 in terms of work. It was a very hard work year for me, which, when work can be super hard, personal life can be super hard. And 23 was just kind of the year where I was just going to do like whatever it felt to kind of get back to what I want to do. So I added a lot of shows in 23. That's not something that I've done a lot. Usually I set my summer in the beginning, and that's kind of the end of it, where I added Wilmington, I added Charleston, I added SPAC, I added Gorge. That's 9 shows right there, just because every time I got back from a trip, I would be like, what's next? And it was just, I just couldn't get enough. And then, I think as much as we all love the band, again, we can recognize when they get on a heater. And pretty much that run from the late June until the end of the tour is something that, we as the people who pay attention to every single night, right, are seeing things that we haven't seen maybe in 10 years, just in terms of the mood that they were in. And I was in the right places at the right time for a lot of just amazing shows. So my 23 was just being blown away again every single weekend. So when you're looking for unexpected and you get, what did we get? 8 tour debuts at Deer Creek Night
Deer
1,
Creek, oh my God,
and
yes. That's when it all turned.
songs that, yeah, and I'm at SPAC, and the best thing that I saw all summer is the return of American Baby intro at SPAC. Like I saw Bella Fleck that weekend, God, yes. And yet American Baby intro just at SPAC blew everything away. And then you go all the way to the Gorge, and I think the best show I saw all tour was the Gorge, Night 1, only to be followed by maybe the most memorable show of the tour, Night 2, which was just weird. And I know that they've played Just Breathe since, but just the mood of that night, and he acknowledged it many times throughout the night.
The first time.
And it was just, somebody asked me after that show, like, what did you think? And I said, I think that I would have wondered, like, what it would have been like to have not been there. Like, imagine not being at that show. So it was just like every time that you thought that they couldn't top the previous weekend, they pretty much did. And it all came together. Like Charlottesville felt like it wrapped up my tour. And I thought about adding MSG. I was looking at flights, but I'm just like, it was the right way to end my tour.
I agree.
So really, like, if next year is anything like this year, then
I hope it is. But can I afford another year like this?
That's something different. I want to piggyback on Renee's question, because there's been so many times, Rob, that I have at the end of a show, because me personally, I go, and I still do, I download a lot of the tapes. And I've told Renae this, I've got like 4 hard drives just of shows, and I'll rotate them through my phone. And there's been many times where I'll go back on Almanac of like a week or so after a show, and I'm like, oh wow, that was the 3rd longest version of 41. What was the longest one? And I'll go down the rabbit hole, and I was like, oh, I don't even have that. I'm going to download that show now, and now I want to listen to that show. So, I guess what I'm wondering is, in your 159, what's the one that where you went and you were just totally blown away, even after so many shows, where you walked out and you're just like, I can't believe I just witnessed that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple examples this year, and for especially like when you ask to just be surprised and you get 8 tour debuts in a show that is 2 months into the tour, like that's and the other thing is like the fake satellite into the So Damn Lucky and the fake Madman's Eyes into Minarets. Like I specifically remember like a text from one of my friends that was like, this band forgot who it was. And you never hear a comment like that in a positive way. Usually you only hear that in a negative way when you're like who showed up today? I thought that, especially because in the beginning of the tour, I guess they got an entire album tour out of the way in the first month, because, all through May, it was like, all right, like it's going to be this album tour. And then they just flipped a switch and went in the exact opposite direction, and really like just absolutely blown away by those Deer Creek shows, because we get debuts at Deer Creek. Like Creek, I can kind of consider a home venue in Cincinnati. Like I've got Riverbend 3 miles away from me. We all like the energy there when you're in there on a Friday night on the lawn. It's different. Like it doesn't have the views. It doesn't have like the balcony or anything, but the vibe there it's really different. So
it's different.
We always get great shows. We always get debuts. They're always in the mood. But a different band kind of showed up that night and stayed for the rest of the tour.
I agree.
And it was just weird, right?
It was wonderfully weird, yes. My favorite kind of weird.
As one of my friends says, in a good way.
Well, Rob, thank you
Yeah.
so much
Cool.
for being on another episode of The Space Between. I know that you
Yes.
have answered so many questions of our listeners, wondering who is the man behind the magic, or who are the men behind the magic. So thank you so much for clarifying so many questions that a lot of Dave Matthews Band fans have. So thank you, Rob, for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks. This was fun.
Absolutely. So, guys, if you are listening to this on a podcast app, just know that you can watch this on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, which is just simply The Space Between Podcast. And be sure that if you are watching this, or if you do click over to YouTube, be sure to subscribe and like our channel. Guys, this is it for this episode, but stay tuned to next Friday, where we will have a completely different guest talking about their voyage with the Dave Matthews Band. So, guys, until next time, peace, love, and Dave Matthews Band.